I'll introduce myself. I'm Juana Hernandez Urquiza, one of the CFNC state representatives for Spanish services, mainly working with Spanish-speaking families across the state of North Carolina to plan, apply, and pay for college. Thank you all for taking the opportunity, and thank you, Heidi, for agreeing to present and support us with this conference, and thank you to all of our participants for joining us this morning. I want to start by introducing Heidi White. Heidi White is the Director for International Student Services and Study Abroad at Durham Technical Community College. Heidi has a bachelor's degree in anthropology and a master's in international studies, and has worked in many international and study abroad offices at various institutions in North Carolina and also abroad. Heidi has spent much of her time at Durham Technical Community College on outreach efforts to provide information on higher education opportunities for local immigrant communities. She believes that everyone should be able to achieve their educational goals no matter their immigration status. She also serves as the advisor for Durham Tech's Latinx club called Cambiando Caminos. This session is titled Latinx Student Ambassadors as Recruitment Agents for Your College Campus. In this session, Heidi will talk about how enrolled students can serve as the best recruiters for college campuses, how they can connect with younger applicants and serve as real-life examples for success for those who are uncertain of their ability to attend college. We'll talk about how Latinx student ambassadors also reach a wider audience by leveraging their bicultural and bilingual abilities to adapt to a variety of different situations. We'll also discuss how campuses face a challenge in recruiting, training, and utilizing enrolled Latinx students as ambassadors. In 2013, Durham Tech created their International Student Ambassador position. And over time, ambassadors have been so successful that staff have been able to grow their responsibilities. In this session, we will learn about the benefits and the challenges of creating an ambassador position, including strategies for recruitment, retention, and student development for Durham Tech staff and previous ambassadors. So now I will turn it to Heidi, who will take it from here.
Thank you, Juana. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me. I'm excited to share information on what we've done, maybe hear from you if you have questions, or if you all are doing similar things or have other advice to offer to anyone who's interested in developing a program or expanding their program. But first, just a little bit about me and my office at Durham Tech, because for those of us at the 58 community colleges, we're all organized a little bit differently. Our positions are all quite different. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of what my position is at Durham Tech, and how that may be very similar or very different from positions at the other community colleges. We are lucky at Durham Tech in that we have the Center for the Global Learner, which is a centralized office for all international or global programs at Durham Tech, which has all of the English as a second language, English as a foreign language programs through the basic skills, continuing education, and curriculum. We also have the Spanish interpretation and translation curriculum programs, lots of international initiatives, and then the two areas which are under me, which is international student services, but I often will say non-US citizen services, and we'll talk a little bit about that why later, and also the study travel abroad programs. And just to give you a little bit of information of what that means, international student services or non-US student services, is I do all of these things, but I highlighted kind of the two in green that are most related to hiring a Latinx student ambassador or ambassadors, because those are kind of the two areas that the student ambassador really assists the whole college with, but specifically my office and my division. So we assist all non-US citizen applicants, and I would say also any applicant that was educated outside the United States with the admissions process, Historically, it's always been just mostly curriculum, but giving information and referring out to other departments and other programs and services. But since we're moving into meta measures and guided pathways, we're really advising on everything to a greater extent than we did before. So really admissions for any part of the college or any program, and outreach. And of course, when I was hired, we weren't doing as much outreach, but because of changing demographics and wanting, to really be able to reach more people in the community, and seeing, as we saw sort of in the first data presentation, that there is a gap between certain populations in our local areas and the enrollment, we really wanted to try to do more outreach to reach all the different constituencies, and at least let them know about our programs and opportunities. So that's sort of how this all came to be. And we saw a lot of data about the state earlier today, if you were able to attend that opening session. And so I just pulled a little bit of data just to tell you a little bit about Durham County and Durham City. Of course, Durham Tech actually serves both Durham and Orange counties, but I didn't want to make this very complicated since there's at least 3 public school systems, and so all the data would get a little bit confusing. So I just focused on our main area of Durham, just to give you a little bit of information on our Hispanic, of course, that's the term that's used in all the data, population, and our enrollment population, and our census info population as of right now. So why did we decide to create a Latinx ambassador or ambassador's position? We were seeing more interest from our Latinx community. We were getting more opportunities, both first we were asked and invited for more opportunities to share information, and then later we were asking to be invited to more places to try to get information out about all the opportunities we had. We also, as we kind of saw in that first presentation, there was definitely a projected increase in our students, especially graduating from the public schools, but also just in the changing demographics. So we were seeing there would be more opportunities for prospective students. And so we wanted to definitely focus on some of those high growth areas. And we really were feeling like we wanted to have more peer representation for recruitment. We kind of looked around at our office at that time and didn't feel like we were the best representation for the Latinx students we wanted to recruit. And we had heard over and over from talking with students, especially younger students, that they really wanted to listen to someone who was just slightly older than them, more than someone who was maybe a few decades older than them. So we also felt like that was a good way to reach out. We also felt like that would be a great opportunity for a student to really grow and develop. And so sort of for all those reasons, we had decided we were going to create one or more positions. But we also lucked out in that at around the same time, Durham Tech had started receiving a portion of the Durham Sales Tax revenue. And that money was for grants for students and also to fund employment opportunities on campus. So we lucked out and we were able to get some of that money designated for one or more of these positions in our office. So we kind of jumped on that opportunity. We designed the position first requiring, we first thought we didn't want a student who was brand new. We wanted a student who'd been there at least a semester. We later kind of changed our mind on that. And there's definitely benefits and challenges to both. But as you know, many times community college students may only be with us for 2 years, sometimes 3 years, sometimes even less. And so we were really trying to get someone that we could try to keep at least for 2 years and really work with them and professionally develop them. So we kind of changed that later, but either way, there's definitely benefits to doing it. We wanted to find students that had an interest in mentoring other students, and helping them through the admissions process and whatever questions they might have. We definitely wanted a student who had bilingual abilities in Spanish and English. And I say that because we found other students that had bilingual abilities in other languages. We wanted students to be comfortable and able to give presentations at community events, at recruitment events, and to really share their story. And I was just in another presentation just now hearing students, and it's just always so great to hear from students. I think all ages really appreciate hearing from an individual student. So we went through the process, we designed the position, and we finally hired our first student in fall 2014. The student that we hired was active in our brand new Latinx club, which Juana mentioned, called Cambiando Caminos, and she served as a leader. So she was both involved in student outreach and activities, and also worked in our office. We first had her just assisting us in presentations, and then she would share her story or give a student perspective. She also helped us talk to parents and students in Spanish, and she would interpret as needed, because many staff at our institution that might be doing these events don't speak Spanish, or not at a high enough level where they feel comfortable doing that. And then later, as time went on, we did more and more presentations and developed materials and practice. The students started giving the presentations, and then the staff were there just to answer questions as needed. We also had the ambassadors help work on materials with staff, kind of looking at it from a student's perspective or a new person's perspective. You know, what language should we use? What other materials do we need? We also did develop some Spanish versions of different materials that we give out, some of which were just written and some of which were on our website. In the fall of 2014, we also held focus groups with some of our Latinx students, and the new ambassador helped with that. And the things that came out of those focus groups was students wanted more mentorship or leadership opportunities. They wanted there to be a sense of belonging and us to help create that. And they said they were looking for more Latinx leaders and representation. So we tried to work on some of these things through developing the ambassador program and Cambiando Caminos Club and other initiatives. So one of the best and worst things, I guess, about hiring these amazing students is they do eventually graduate. So you have this amazing student that's been doing all these presentations, but then they graduate. But that also opens up the opportunity to hire another person and go through the process again and maybe further develop it. So in January 2017, we hired our second ambassador. We were even, I guess, more blessed with her because she stayed an even longer time with us and just left us this spring. With the time with her, we had a more formal idea of the job because we'd been through the process. We had developed it more. We gave her more tasks and more responsibility. We also cross-trained her to work in the office, which she loved because she loved kind of learning more and doing more things. So she kind of really knew all the aspects of the job. Previously, we'd had other students that were only doing office, and then some students would give presentations, but we started doing more cross-training. And like I said, the second student stayed with us for 3 years, and she even started going to events and doing presentations on her own without a staff. And I think really enjoyed doing that. And we loved having a student that was that independent and that, able to do all those things for us, because we can't always be everywhere at the same time. So what were some of the benefits? So the benefits that we saw was that the Latinx community that we were doing outreach in, whether that was at community events, citywide festivals, tables, high schools, etc. We really found that they loved having a peer. So someone who had been especially in the high schools, had been in their kind of like in their seat a few years before. So they really connected with them. We also found that families really loved connecting and speaking with the ambassador in Spanish. And I would say especially regarding some more sensitive issues. So often, especially about immigration status, things like that. we found that people really were drawn to the ambassadors, to talk to them about that. The ambassadors really grew in their public speaking and their written presentation skills. They also really grew in their Spanish, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, and their leadership. And as the supervisor, we really, and the whole department, we really got to know the ambassadors on a real individual level, because we were working with them so much and driving with them to different locations to give presentations. And so we really could support them in their journey. And we learned a lot more about their experiences being first generation Latinx students. And both of the ambassadors we've had have been that. They have actually had very different histories and very different immigration statuses. And so it also, again, shows the diversity of our Latinx community. Other benefits is once we had a student, and if anyone ever saw them present, then they became requested by everyone. So of course, there are other departments on campus that are doing recruitment events. It could be specific to certain program areas or just general high school fairs, etc. And so our student got requested to do lots and lots of presentations, and we started actually training other students to go with them or to do similar presentations. It created opportunities at the college where they would ask the student to come visit other offices and talk to them or learn about them. The foundation highlighted our ambassadors, you know, for anything they were doing, especially when they were meeting with possible donors. They were highlighted on our website. There were stories written about them. So they really got a lot of notice, and then we're getting noticed by getting awards or meeting donors or meeting upper level administration that they may not have had the opportunity to do. So it really was a great opportunity for them for a wide variety of reasons. We also connected the ambassador with the college liaisons, and we are lucky at Durham Tech. I know, again, colleges are very different, to have college liaisons in many of the area high schools that work for Durham Tech, especially for our dual enrollment programs, middle college programs, and to help students transition directly from high school to community college. And we have one of those positions, which is a bilingual liaison. So the ambassador would often work with all of them, but especially with the bilingual one in different events and presentations they were doing. But we also had challenges, right? There's always challenges with everything that we do. These students, as I said, got really popular, but they were students. They had things they needed. They needed to go to class. Most of them were high achieving students, both in school, but also had multiple jobs, also had some home responsibilities. So there's always a challenge of, you know, they're not at your beck and call because they are, you know, first a student, and you want to protect them for being able to go to class and do homework. The amount of time I've already mentioned of how long you can keep an ambassador. I think one of our ambassadors would stay with us forever, but we really want her to continue on with her bachelor's degree, and she is doing that, and we miss her and she misses us. But you know, they are wonderful students, and so you want them to also go out into the world and learn more and share their talents. There is definitely some dedicated staff time to supervising and mentoring the students, especially I would say in the first semester, but even the first year. There's definitely a lot of training time, depending on what level of detail of information you want them to know. So I work in my position with all the different immigration statuses, and that's a whole, you know, dictionary of terminology and documents and alphabet soup of visas and restrictions and benefits and things like that. So if I wanted the ambassador to know all of those things, that takes even more time than if we just want them to know sort of general information. So some of it really depends on what level you want the person to be able to talk to students and prospective students about and their families. So it really just depends. And of course, we all have so many different types of programs, non-credit, credit, basic skills, etc., CCR. So how much of the volume of different programs and services do you want the student to be able to talk about? We also had some challenges, and I know other colleges could definitely have these challenges with funding the position or positions. Like I said, in Durham Tech, we are very lucky that we get this sales tax, but it may not be forever. So we may at some point not have that money anymore, or as much money. I would say other options to pursue, and we have pursued also, thinking about the case that we might lose the money, is if the student can qualify for financial aid work study and your office can get a financial aid work study position on campus, that might be an option. Or if there's any type of grant or scholarship program, or the college can create that, or someone sponsors it. But I would say, I would definitely suggest the student be paid for the work for a variety of reasons. And so making sure that you can pay the student or students for this work. Also, there's lots of diversity, we probably all know, among Spanish. And so we had quite a lot of challenges in thinking about developing the materials and giving the presentations as far as which Spanish to use, which terms to use. There were, I don't want to say arguments, but there were definitely people with differing opinions, because we have people on our campus and our students that come from different countries and different backgrounds. And so talking about what Spanish to use, which terms to use, and also thinking about who our audience is and what terms they're going to recognize, and what is the education level of the people that we're working with. We also found that even though many of our students are bilingual and speak fluent Spanish at home, they are not always necessarily prepared to do the presentation completely in Spanish. They think of their Spanish most of the time as being informal, right? Something they do with their family and friends. And so it wasn't something that they were necessarily immediately prepared to do an academic presentation, a professional presentation. So they wanted to practice, and, we helped them with that, and we really tried to develop that with them. And they would, talk to other native Spanish speakers about the words they're using, and, have other people look at it. So that was something that they also, I think in the end, said they really loved, that they had this growth of being comfortable delivering professional presentations or speaking professionally in Spanish, because they hadn't really had that opportunity. The students we were working with were either born in the United States or had been here for a very long time. And so their whole educational career was in English. And so they were used to, anytime they did a presentation for school, it was always in English. So that was something that I think they really appreciated, but something to be aware of when you're hiring a student. There's also been some challenge in hiring new ambassadors, right? Some of it has to do, of course, with scheduling and availability and interest, and the student, feeling confident that they can do it. We have also tried to look at both non-traditional students, so students who might be a little bit older, because we definitely have a lot of our population that we're talking to that are non-traditional students, but then also students that are coming directly from high school, so that they identify with students who are in high school now, or 10th, 11th, 12th grade, and might be coming to the community college soon. So I think there's lots of things to think about as far as, the different ways of recruiting. We have connected with Latinx groups in high schools to, or counselors, to try to help them identify students that might be coming to Durham Tech. The college liaisons sometimes have helped us. So, you want a student that hopefully will stay with you if possible, but also a student who's interested in learning and developing. And we originally had an idea that this student also would develop a more formal mentoring programs with students, but we were finding that the demand for all these other things really were taking precedent. And so we haven't had the opportunity to do that, but we are hoping to do that in the future. And I am looking at the chat box, and I think the only question I see right now is how many ambassadors did we have at one time? So technically, we always only had one that was in the position and being paid at one time. But we had other students that were working our front desk that we would often get to do presentations, you know, with their comfort, as long as they were comfortable. And also sometimes they would do a presentation with the ambassador because we wanted to share multiple student stories. So that gave them some comfort kind of doing it with them in the beginning. We also would pull students from our Latinx club to go especially into high schools and things like that and share their story. So we had one specifically paid position each semester, but that doesn't mean if you have the money or the time or the funding that you couldn't expand it, and we've talked about expanding it as well. So unfortunately, our two past ambassadors were not able to be here at this time. They're both at universities pursuing their next steps. But I did interview them the other day and ask them some questions about, you know, what they would want to share with you all about the benefits or the challenges. And so I'll just pause for a second and let you read some of the quotes from one of our ambassadors. But they seem to be getting the benefits that we anticipated or we have also experienced. So it's good, you know, that they're saying some of the same things that we're thinking. They have really said they feel like they've developed as a leader. They really think it's important to have a position like this or positions like this because of that connection with students. And oftentimes people want one person to go to with a lot of their questions, at least as an initial resource, and they feel like that they could serve in that capacity. And that sharing that story is really important. And our other ambassador also shared some other quotes, which I'll leave here for just a second to say again how she felt. And she also has an interesting story. She came to us as a pre-nursing student, you know, was going through all the classes for nursing. And fortunately or unfortunately, she fell in love with doing this type of work. And so she has now changed her pathway, and she's now at the university pursuing a degree in international studies and hoping to work in international admissions and recruitment professionally in the future. So a benefit she got is this great, you know, beginning job experience that hopefully will, you know, just help her in the future. And maybe she'll come back to a community college, or maybe she'll be doing other amazing things. And the last thing I wanted to share with you, but I absolutely would love to hear feedback, questions, your experiences if you've done similar things, is I did share a little bit about the job description. I will say it's actually a really detailed job description, but this is the part I thought that might be of interest to you. I'm happy to send the entire job description if that would be helpful. And it was done just like we would do any of the other staff job descriptions. It's, you know, lots of detail, but that just shows you a little bit about what we have as far as the job description. We did take applications and interview candidates, although we also took recommendations again from high school counselors or from current students. They would sometimes identify people they knew that were coming that they thought would be a good fit for the position. And that's all I had so far for my presentation. I wanted to make sure we had some time for questions. So feel free to unmute yourself if you have questions or if you need me to go back to another slide. But if you're, especially if you're trying to recruit in the Latinx community through your schools or students in the community, potential students in the community, I would definitely look into doing something like this if you can, because I do think it develops the student. I think the college staff learn a lot from it, and it really just shares a unique voice from the student. And you'll see that the students all have very different experiences. So each ambassador brings kind of something new to the role.
Heidi, I had a question.
Sure.
And you talked about this, but I forgot, and I just
Go
wanted
ahead.
you to clarify.
No worries.
How are the ambassadors being funded at Durham Tech?
Sure.
You
So
talked about it, but
Sure. So at Durham Tech, we're lucky in that we have a special program where we're getting money from the Durham Sales Tax, and that money is going into a fund, and that fund is for scholarships and hiring student workers on campus. So that's how we have funded it in the past. However, we also have had student workers in our office that were federal financial aid work study workers. So if the student you wanted as the ambassador qualified for federal financial aid work study, then that might be an opportunity for you to hire the student as well. There might be other funding sources that your college campus might have, but the work study position might be the easiest access maybe for most campuses, but that would mean the student would have to qualify for that. But we are lucky in that we're getting the sales tax, so we have designated some of that money for hiring students, and then those students, the way we've designed it, they only have to live in Durham, so there's really no other restrictions other than if you're able to hire them as a worker.
thank you. And I'm just curious, for the participants that are on the call, do any of your campuses have student ambassadors, or is this something that you see that you would want to bring as an initiative on your college campus to support student recruitment?
Hey everyone, this is Amelia Bain from Pitt Community College. We have a couple different general student ambassador programs. We have a Bruisers Crew program, which is a mentoring program, but none of them are focused on Latinx students. So it would be interesting to see if maybe we could get some leverage to use one of the positions to focus specifically on this population. Or if we could expand our club opportunities. I think the biggest challenge at Pitt is going to be funding, because I don't know if we have any specific designated funding that could be used. But I definitely think it's an interesting way to expand recruitment to our Latinx population. I do think they want to hear from their peers, and they trust their peers more than us sometimes. So yeah, I definitely think it's interesting, and I really appreciate all the information, Heidi.
No problem. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Amelia. So good to see you. Also had another question, Heidi. So I have actually had the opportunity to see the student ambassadors in action throughout the year whenever we were doing programming. And would you say that how well do the ambassadors connect with the parents? I think that they do a really great job with connecting with students, but do you feel like the parents are also connecting with the ambassadors?
I think they really are, especially in the case of our parents really wanting a Spanish speaker. So I think that helps. And I think especially if parents are of high school students. So if the student is just a few years younger than the student ambassador, it seems like they're connecting in saying to their son or daughter, like, oh, you should do what the ambassadors, you should follow. They can do it. You can do it too. So I think in that way there is some connection. Again, I think the only thing is, we have been talking about maybe a non-traditional student so that they might connect better with prospective students that might be at a different point in their life. But I would want to say, I think they connect well, but that doesn't mean there aren't other opportunities for other types of ambassadors to connect with other populations, I guess I would say.
Right. Yeah, and I definitely will agree. And just seeing the interactions, and like you were saying, the parents, once they see this young college student, and they're like, oh, like, if they did it, you can do it too. And there is that connection with the parents as well with the students. And another question for you, Heidi, is what would it be, I guess, the first step that a college or any of the participants, if they want to implement this program on their college campus, what would you say would be, I guess, the first steps to start this process?
So I think finding funding would definitely be the first step. And then the second step would be identifying, who would be the supervisor, and sort of what do you see the initial things that the ambassador would do? Like, do you already, some colleges might have a recruiter, and does the recruiter have a list of events that they would attend or that are hosted on campus throughout the year, and which ones are ones that the ambassador would definitely want to be at to share their story? Are there other opportunities that you haven't been taking advantage of, maybe because you didn't have a Spanish speaking representative to go out into this community? So I guess looking and seeing first like what you already have or what the potential is for the student. But I also think we wanted a Latinx ambassador for particular reasons, but that does not mean that the student didn't go to other recruitment events that had nothing to do with being a Spanish speaker or being Latinx. They also are just a great student representative for any recruitment event. So I think the big thing is, preparing them, getting them comfortable. Students will come in with more or less public speaking experience. And so I think a lot of it is just getting them comfortable with sharing their story, maybe initially, and, having them practice and answering some questions, that students and parents and other people might be asking of them. And then practicing a portion of a presentation or a presentation about going to college and why going to college and what are the steps. And explaining, how they went through the steps or what were the challenges for them with the steps. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I do think you build on it. I don't think you start immediately and have everything. That was one reason why I wanted to share sort of our timeline is we didn't start, the student who just graduated, even when she wasn't doing everything that she did in that last year in the first 2 years. So we really were able, because we were able to keep her for 3 years, she grew and grew and grew. And like I said, was doing presentations on her own and felt comfortable doing that. I also think one of the biggest skills that the students will learn, not only just public speaking and leadership and things like that, is also the idea that you might arrive somewhere and things might be different than anticipated. We would be invited places and we would think we would be giving a presentation, and then we would be at a table. We would show up and tell them we were going to be doing a PowerPoint, but there was no technology. So I think adapting and adjusting to changing circumstances and being comfortable with that was one of the greatest skills that our students really learned. And it takes time to practice that and learn that I'm going to show up to this event and there might not be a plug for my laptop, or there might not be a computer. And can I still give out the information when there's no technology and I had prepared this PowerPoint. Now they're going to have me give a talk on something that I didn't know I was going to talk about, but it's something I can talk about. So I think that's also some of the life skills and real professional skills that that the ambassadors learned and had to learn and got really comfortable with.
Right. Thank you, Heidi. Those are really, you definitely answered the question. I appreciate you sharing some of those strategies or steps that we can take, and just what are those things that, we have to adapt. And I can definitely, I have experienced similar situations where I go to do a presentation and there's no screen, so you just have to, make it work with what you have. So thank you so much for sharing that. I don't know if there are any questions from any of the participants. It seems like some of you may already have ambassador programs on your college campus, but maybe they're not specific to the Latinx population or community. And so it's definitely something to think about if you're interested in maybe talking to your supervisor and following some of those steps that Heidi mentioned. It seems like funding may be the main kind of starting point to start this position for students. But if there are other questions, feel free to unmute yourself or add them in the chat box. And if not, if there aren't any other questions, then we can end this meeting. And then we have another a closing remarks session that we're going to be doing with Matt and Susan again. And I'm going to include the link to that here. Just give me 1 second. I'll include the link in the chat box.
And I will just say one last thing. If anyone wants to discuss sort of a more detail what we did, or if you want to talk to the ambassadors, they are both amazing, wonderful women doing great things out at universities now. And so they were kind of sad they couldn't be here today. But you also, if like I said, once they started getting established on our campus, they got invited to do presentations for other people. So you would often see one of our ambassadors at the Mexican consulate anytime they were doing community programs. She was often talking. Anytime there's sort of a presentation on community college and universities and private colleges, public universities and private colleges, often they would ask our student to be the representative, especially in this triangle area. So there's, you know, many different ways you can develop this, but I'm happy to share our job description. I'm happy to share questions we asked them in the interview, you know, presentations they've done, etc. Whatever would be helpful, because I think all of us just have the goal of reaching more of our local population and helping them to enroll and reach their goals.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining. I included the link to the agenda where you can find the link to the next session, which is the closing remarks. If you could please join us for that. We'd love to hear from you all, and we're also going to be sharing some updates on future presentations. Thank you, Heidi, again, and thank you, everyone. I hope to see you all in a little bit.
Thank you, everyone.